It's been a while since I've done one of these research heavy exposés, so make sure you buckle up and you guys can all thank the Twitter troll account that just lit a fire in my soul. And yes, I am going to call it Twitter because X is stupid. This account, their main thing or one of their main things is trying to point out how blacks are less intelligent, less capable, and less deserving and unable to work in the medical field was the specific post that got me here. And I thought, why not take the time to show why this guy themselves are rocking a base 860 IQ and trying to misframe things and outright lie, likely an attempt to reassure himself about his own stupidity, because it's always the faceless centrist accounts who boil down to just being pseudo-intellectual racists. So point for point, let's go. Though we do first have to start with the end so we can understand his conclusion and the point he's trying to make, and then we'll go top down. As you can see, it's about Black people first being favored in institutions, which is hilarious in and of itself, and then also that they're just not capable to be doctors or in the medical field writ large, which he doesn't outright say, but it's obviously implied with the somehow imagine that they're capable. So now that we do understand his conclusion, let's tackle the first point, his one of many weak ones, the lower standardized test scores and high school GPAs seen among Black students, which conservatives, white supremacists, and racists alike often use to try to drive home their point that whites are better without ever mentioning or diving into disparate impact on these tests, something that has been studied immensely. So they have the data there that they could look at. Mostly they don't though, because it shatters their, less capable worldview that they want to paint to make themselves feel better. First off, you can see how this inaccurately reflects group differences in educational attainment when you see that it's equally difficult for a white college-bound senior to rank in the top 10% of their class as it is for them to get over a 600 on a section of an SAT, while for Black and Mexican students, it is considerably more difficult to score over a 600 on an SAT section than it is for them to be in the top 10% of their class. And if you look at the ratio between whites and Blacks in the top 10% of their class, the difference becomes negligible then. So the racial bias can also be shown in disparate impact when looking at the selections or the way that questions are selected that make it on the SAT. A study shows in a 1998 SAT, a question where white students answered 24% more correctly than African Americans was left on the test. And the question that African Americans answered correctly 8% more than whites was removed from it. And then there's another where 11% more whites answered it correctly. That was left in the scored section of the SAT, while one favoring African Americans by 7% was left in the unscored part of the test. So when the SAT is using methods of selecting questions that typically always favor white students, you can see why white students typically then score higher. The College Board themselves has acknowledged this, stating that racial inequalities exist and of course are shown in the SAT as well. Point 2 of dropping out and having lower GPAs in STEM fields, the reason for this are also clearly bared out. Surprise, surprise, he didn't link or show any of the data to back up his own claim is because, would have disagreed with him, as in no other field are there substantial differences in rates of switching majors or dropping out between the races. Thus, it's important to ask why. STEM fields are known for having introductory weed out courses that are extremely arduous, that are meant to weed out large portions of enrollees. And writ large, white students are more prepared for this sort of rigorous structure. 32% of Black students lived in poverty compared to 10% of whites, meaning they have less access to the advanced technology, less money for resources to help them with these courses, less quality education leading up as well. And there is significant research as well to the purposefully constructed exclusionary spaces in STEM, where students writ large, all students, no matter their race, already feel kind of more pressure in terms of needing to prove that they deserve to stay, while on top of that, minority students are subjected to stereotypes that in STEM is more likely to be present than in other areas of life. And studies also show that due to this direct stereotyping and implicit bias, Black STEM students receive less support and inclusion both from the faculty, so the teachers and the workers, as well as fellow classmates, which increases their feelings of isolation, which, by the way, the scores and stuff aren't drastically different in and of it, or this happening isn't drastically different in and of itself. itself, 29% for white students, 40% for black students. So you can see how maybe this kind of stereotyping and isolation and things, discrimination that they feel writ large can affect that small difference. Point 3 is that black medical students who graduate fail the medical board licensing exams at higher rates, which ostensibly looks to be true. If all you do is just look at numbers, you don't have context, you know, the defeater of misinformation. But all research shows that prediction of achievement on these are dictated by GPA as undergraduates, the number of science courses they took, and the medical college admission tests, not race. Nothing to do with race. Also important to note, you receive multiple attempts to pass the test, and black medical students do substantially better on their second or third attempts, narrowing the gap again to almost be negligible. Another thing that is really important to note is that while high scores are good predictors of success in medical school and just the field in general, low scores are much less useful, and there's not really data to bear out a correlation, especially among black students, where black students with low MCAT scores are actually more likely to succeed than white with a low MCAT score, seeing how this isn't going to affect them to the same extent. And this holds up in multiple sectors of medicine as well. Mixed results are shown in several specialties, including emergency medicine, family medicine, hematology, medical oncology, internal medicine, ophthalmology, pediatrics, surgery. More literature is needed in other specialties, with plenty of studies themselves also absolutely showing no correlation between scores and performance or competency-based milestone. So then he goes on to state in his next point that black people receive preferential treatment in these programs, again, hilarious, and that they are heavily prioritized over Asians and white applicants, which, by the way, is just grossly untrue. And even then, it's just missing the forest for the trees. For every 100 medical school spots, 65 go to white or Asian applicants, and only 16 go to black or Hispanics. If you were to take 5 seats away from the underrepresented group and give them to white students, the decrease in black and Hispanics would be 31% for only a 7% increase in the overrepresented. And at our top schools, Asian Americans are represented 6% above their population share. Whites are 13% above, while black students are 8% under. So it's not even a competition, like not even kind of close. And when affirmative action procedures are not in place, this gap only grows wider. And in diverse education, especially higher education, students see increases in academic performance, retention, community engagement, cooperation, and just general openness to different perspectives and ideas. Even studies that are against affirmative action concede that the low representation of African Americans in admissions illustrates substantial racial disparities in educational experiences prior to college, all of which this guy would tell you was fake, by the way, and that addressing that preparation, the preparation gaps that you see due to that, would maintain the diversity while removing the need for affirmative action. While I can admit it's not perfect, it is far better than the current reality without it, where people don't want to address the preparation gaps as well. They just want black people to pull themselves up by the bootstraps, but billionaires, you know, give them more tax breaks, right? But this guy also, like I said, wants you to believe none of that is true, despite black kids being twice as more likely to grow up in poverty than white or Asian students, meaning twice as more likely to attend schools with less funding and fewer resources, not as rigorous an academic structure, thus not preparing them in the same way or at the same rates for these sorts of standardized testing, which is, again, bared out in them then performing better after a few attempts. It's also reflective of their lower test scores being less reflective of their overall performance in the field, as we've always shown. The next point pertains to larger dropout rates at residency training programs than white and Asian residents, which can easily be explained also by large amounts of discrimination being experienced. A survey of 7,000 residents found that 25% of them faced discrimination based on their race or ethnicity, with black students by far being the most disproportionately affected. 25% of black students experienced slurs and hurtful racial comments. 62% were being referred as non-physicians despite being in residency, and 38% experienced different standards of evaluation. Another study of 19 black residents in an interview reported 13 or more seeing or experiencing themselves unfair treatment as far as the termination of black residents. They were led to believe they had less opportunity in the field and more need to be on guard in that field at all times. These things directly leading to higher rates of burnout. And this last point that he made, has absolutely no data to back it up. I'm convinced that he just completely fabricated this to make it seem like there was some sort of a conclusion that wasn't just racism that he was trying to reach to make his previous argument seem stronger, when there's not. There's no data to back it up. And actually, all data on the matter would point the other way. Actually, diversity among physicians is shown to be drastically better for patient care. The implicit bias of white doctors has led to more malpractice seen in black patients. And like, there's black people who they didn't prescribe pain pills because they thought like black people were like superheroes or some shit. Like, it's kind of crazy. And also, the patients that have doctors of the same race typically have better outcomes, and also underrepresented physicians like African Americans are more likely to work in urban and underdeserved communities and take care of patients who have less access to healthcare, while malpractice is witnessed more in rural areas, which is dominated by white physicians. So again, it doesn't make any sense. His end claim that black doctors are just inherently less capable is hardly backed up by data, and most of the claims he made to support it are descriptive rather than prescriptive, which is, if you're looking at issues, especially issues you want to fix, you want to be prescriptive. You know, if you got stabbed in the stomach and you got blood on your shirt, the answer wouldn't be to change your shirt because you're just going to get more blood on your shirt. It would be to address the wound. That would be being prescriptive. Being descriptive would be like, oh, there's blood on my shirt, so my shirt's dirty, so I'm dirty. That's like, that's pretty much the point that he's trying to make. He's not at all trying to address what causes these disparities. He's just pointing out the disparities and then saying, haha, black people suck. The true impact of them is past just data on a sheet, right? Or the outcomes driven by race. And there's a reason that, again, he links no data, he links no studies, he doesn't ever deep dive into the why or the effects, or he just points at vague problems and says, it's because they're black. That's because it wouldn't support his end claim that black people are inherently less capable, and it would show the reasons why. It would show that there are plenty of barriers that still hold black people back to this day. And despite those barriers and the clear bias still present, they are managing to become more and more successful when given the opportunity. And that's the reason that racist gremlins like this fuck come crawling out of the woodwork, all in envious hopes to just knock them back down. If you enjoyed this video, we're Social Society. We're a commentary channel influenced by politics, society, and the economy. We are pretty left-leaning on this channel, but we're open to our right-wingers as well. The biggest thing here is having conversations that get everyone to the bottom of the truth. If that sounds like something that could interest you, consider smashing that subscribe button, leaving us a like, or even commenting on this video. We even have memberships available as low as $3 if you'd like to support, because the only way we become a society is together.